Rabbi Mendel Kaplan is joining us this morning. Rabbi Kaplan, how are you?
Good morning, Zelda. I'm fine. Baruch Hashem. How you doing?
Okay, so, where do we go from here? Laws of inheritance. Let's talk about laws of inheritance.
Zelda, you said you're hanging in like everyone else. I'm not so sure everybody hangs into that well.
Okay, why not?
Why not? That's a good question. I think that if you don't have a purpose to life, if life is empty and vacuous, you won't hang in there very well. And that's because it goes against our grain not to have purpose. And we can't find satisfaction if we're not living in a meaningful fashion. I was once sitting on a plane, and there was this gangster rapper kind of guy next to me, and we started talking about purpose in life, and I started sharing with him details of the 7 Noahide laws, and he actually burst into tears. He's like a funny looking guy covered with gold jewelry, and he said, "You mean life has a purpose?" He was like blown away by the idea that life actually had a purpose, and he was very moved by it. And during the course of our conversation, he told me that he was planning to kill somebody. He was planning to kill somebody because he was in a gang, and somebody had killed his best friend, and he found out who it was. And I told him that you can't do that. And he said, "But they killed my friend." And I said, "Yeah, that could be, but it's still the wrong thing to do. God doesn't allow us the privilege of extrajudicial justice, and we cannot do these things on our own." I suggested that he go to the police.
How did he respond to that?
He actually wept. He wept, and then he came to, and he thanked me for giving him that clarity, and he promised me that he wasn't going to commit murder, which I thought was pretty incredible. And that's really, Zelda, what it's about. If you have a sense of meaning to life, if you have a sense of mission, and you have a sense of purpose, then you try to do the right thing, and regardless of what life throws at you, you hang in there. So I think that the importance.
Tell us more about him.
Oh, this fellow?
More about him and where he is going from here.
Well,
he killed people.
He actually claimed not to have. He claimed not to have people. It was actually an extremely odd encounter. I thought we even mentioned this. I thought I mentioned this at some point on air. Maybe I didn't. I was returning from Puerto Rico, where my wife and I had gone to visit. We have a daughter who was on shlichut together with her husband and our grandson, and we had gone after the Passover holiday. We missed our daughter. We wanted to see our son-in-law and our grandson, so we hopped on a plane, and we spent a couple of days visiting them in San Juan. And on the way back, I was sitting on the plane, and this guy, a big tall guy, he just came over to me, and I had been doing something. I think I was studying, and he jabbed me in the shoulder. He said, "Hey, Jew!" I turned around to look at this guy, and I said, like, "What are you saying? How do you speak that way? That's extremely disrespectful and inappropriate." I said, "Would you like me to refer to the color of your skin? Or would you find that a pejorative and inappropriate?" And he said, I think that would be inappropriate. I said, "Well, calling me Jew is inappropriate as well. And I don't appreciate it. And you could be respectful, because we should all be respectful to each other, because each and every one of us is created in God's image, and the color of our skin or the choice of our lifestyle doesn't add or subtract from our being created in God's image." So he actually apologized, and I got up, and he moved in. He sat down next to me, and then that's how we got into the conversation. We started talking. We started talking about.
Did he say he's Jewish?
No, he wasn't Jewish. He was most certainly not Jewish. He was
I thought he was Jewish.
Oh, no. This guy was he was an African American, extremely not Jewish. I think he was a-religious, actually. Although he told me that one of the best parts of his childhood was when he lived with his grandparents, who were religious Christians, and he had he enjoyed that little part of his childhood. But otherwise, he was living a very dissolute, empty life. He's a member of a gang, and he didn't tell me what his vocation is, but I was unwilling even to guess. It was probably not necessarily the most kosher, or certainly not the most edifying way to live life. And I talked to him about the seven Noahide laws. I talked to him about the fact that we are created by God, placed in this world for a purpose, and that we could best learn what that purpose is by reading and studying what God had told us insofar as life is concerned. And that, of course, is the seven Noahide laws. That's the owner's manual. That's God's prescription to live a life that's uplifted and purposeful. So I told him about them. And one of the Noahide laws is the principle that one is not permitted to take an innocent human life, which, by the way, Zelda, is extremely relevant, unfortunately, here in Canada, not because we have people running around shooting others, but because it's become popular to choose to end one's life on their own terms instead of uh, leaving it in God's hands. And that's actually wrong. It's profoundly wrong. It's an act of bloodletting, and it is a violation of the Torah and a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. And I can't speak about this often enough. Unfortunately, in our country, which is an enlightened and by and large ethical and moral country, we have legislated the kinds of laws that encourage people to kill other people if those people would like to end their life, and if they feel unhappy or uncomfortable or are suffering, we have convinced ourselves that it's perfectly okay to administer a lethal shot and check out. And I want to tell you, Zelda, that is a violation of the Torah's basic codes. It's egregiously wrong. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's unholy, and it is necessarily comprising an enormous spiritual stain on the fabric of our society. And I'm very concerned with it. I worry much about the long-term effects of legalized murder.
How does your family respond to everything that you're doing? I mean, they understand that it's part of who you are, but how do they feel about it? Do you ever sit down and ask them what they think?
Ask them what they think insofar as what my public life, my activities to promulgate Torah and mitzvahs.
Right.
I think by and large, my family is very supportive. My family is very supportive. One of my siblings is not particularly religious, and he took a different path. He was a member of the Israel Defense Force, and he defended the land of Israel. And I'm very proud of him for doing that. And he has a little bit of a different path, but he too has been inspired by my classes on trust, on bitachon, and by and large, I think I'm very fortunate to have an extremely supportive and tight knit family. And I have to tell you, Zelda, that having a family that's supportive and loving and tight knit is probably the greatest blessing that any of us could ever hope for.
What do you consider supportive? Well, what do you consider supportive? I mean, they are going along with what you do. They believe in who you are. What is supportive in your mind?
Supportive in my mind is when your family is on the same page, and for the most part they are. Even if they aren't actively doing what I do, they kind of believe in what I'm doing, which is edifying. And supportive means that you are valued and appreciated for who you are as a member of the family. And I think that that's something that all of us can and should be doing. We should be supportive of members of our family, as long as they're not doing bad things. If they're doing something which is inappropriate, then I think that we have to find an effective way of at least registering a protest and suggesting that this is not something we support, at the same time emphasizing that we love, care for, and will always support the members of our family in the things that they do that don't contradict what we believe in and what we live for. So if you have a member of your family who is choosing to do nefarious things, or bad things, dangerous things, criminal things, inappropriate things, I don't think that they should be supported in doing that. I think you can, though, send a message that you love them, not their behavior, and that you're supportive of them per se, without being supportive of the choices that they're making.
When you talk about being supportive, what does that infer to you? Does it mean to go along the way you are, and be happy with the way things are going, or what does supportive mean?
What does supportive mean insofar as? I'm sorry, Zelda. Can you explain the question a little bit more better to me?
I mean, what does supportive mean to you? How does your family support us? How do they support you?
I think that
Come on.
I think that we are supportive of each other when we show love and appreciation towards each other, when we're able to express ourselves in ways that are complementary, when we're able to appreciate what somebody else has rather than being jealous of it. And yes, sometimes family experiences jealousy. The Gemara says that only a parent will not be jealous of a child, but oftentimes sibling and cousins can be jealous, and that's a terrible thing. Family jealousies can rock the foundation of our life. So I think we have to be able to rejoice in each other's successes and value what somebody else is able to achieve, and that means to be supportive. That means to be supportive. And sometimes Zelda supportive means literally to be there, whether it's to be a listening ear, whether it's to be a shoulder for somebody to cry on, whether it's to do favors for your family and friends when they need you. Those are things that are supportive. It's not rocket science.
Well, I think you're fortunate if you find family members who are supportive of you, because in most cases they're not. They are supportive of what you may be doing, but they are not necessarily supportive of who you are. In your family, how do you support one another? I mean, what does supportive mean?
Zelda, it must be said that the people we spend a lot of time with are not necessarily the people who are closest to us. And the people who are closest to us may not be the people that we spend a lot of a quantity of our day with. Many people spend many hours in the office, and they could be there 8 o'clock in the morning. Some people don't leave the office till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and they may not see their family for a very long during their waking hours. Yet it is those hours that are most meaningful and most important. Everything else is kind of a bridge leading in that direction. So when we talk about our family being supportive, it doesn't mean that we necessarily speak to members of our family on a daily or even sometimes weekly basis. It doesn't mean that we are engaged in a constant give or take. It means that when you are together, you value and appreciate each other, and that there is the knowledge that your family will always be there for you. They will always have your back, and that they care deeply about you. And like I said, it's not a question of quantity, it's a question of quality. I think that we need to appreciate the family unit, understand that it's a godly idea. It's not only a natural thing. In the animal world, for the most part, we don't find this emphasis on family units. There are people who have relationships with animals, like I know you love your dog, for example, but your dog doesn't know its family. And that's fine. In the canine world, they're not necessarily supposed to know family, although mothering instinct is actually a natural and profound and powerful thing according to Torah. But other than a mothering instinct,
Why is it that everything you embrace that's around you is not part of you? I mean, you have a dog, you love a dog, it's part of your family, it's part of who you are. Why shouldn't that be considered to be family? I don't understand. You have this different persona about animals, and you that's just the way you're brought up. Doesn't mean you don't have respect, but you just don't have the same outlook that I may have that I appreciate for.
Zelda, we've said this before, and I'm going to tell you that family is not friends. They're not the same thing. And I don't believe a dog is family. I'm sorry. Your dog could be your friend, and maybe man's best friend, and it may be a creature that provides you with comfort, and that's very nice. But family is the people with whom we share DNA. And the Torah emphasizes the important relationship between the people we're related to, or the spouses of the people that we're related to. So they say you choose your friends, you can't choose your relatives. That's true. But if at all possible, we need to be there for our family. And blood is thicker than water, as they say. And that's not about friendship, or it's not even about sharing the same sentiments or ideas or values. It's about the fact that there is an inherent bond and a connection. And that's something we should foster, and something we should try to nurture, and it's something that has to be worked on. I want to tell you that as a rule, it is not necessarily easy for people to have positive relationships when it comes to family. It's a challenging thing. In fact, when it comes to something like witnesses or edim, the Torah says that family can never serve as a witness. They can't be acting as in a form of testimony. And Maimonides says to us that this is something which we can't understand. I mean, obviously, if your family says good things about you, we can't trust them. They're subjective. But if your family has bad things to say about you, if even your family says bad things about you, then it must be true. And he says, well, this is just a gzera takatuv. It's something which we can't really understand. It's beyond the scope of our comprehension. However, Rabbi Aaron Halevi of Barcelona, the purported author of Sefer Achinuch, the book of Torah education, he maintains the fact that that's not so hard to understand. He says family always elicits and engenders extreme feelings, sometimes feelings of extreme closeness, where people will go to all ends to aid and assist and help members of the family, and sometimes an animosity and an acrimony that's just unbelievable and can't be found anywhere else. And he says the bottom line is, when it comes to family, we are never objective. And the subjectivity can swing either way, but family is always going to elicit strong feelings. Many years ago, there was a woman who had a very bad relationship with her family. She divorced her husband, and she had nothing to do with him, which is fine, so that she wasn't his family anymore. But then she was not only fighting, but actually going after her children. It was terrible. And she would tell me how much she hated her children and how terrible they were. And I once said to her, what do you need all this grief for? Why don't you just divorce your children the way you divorced your husband, and then you could be rid of them and finished, and you won't have to have all this pain and all this frustration and all this suffering and anxiety. And she said to me, Rabbi, what is wrong with you? You can't divorce your children. And I said, precisely. So if you can't divorce your children, maybe working on starting to like them a little more would be a good idea. In other words, there's an inherent bond between family. You can't separate between a mother and her children. Our relationships with friends or with animals are not like our relationships with children or with siblings or with the children of our siblings. These are blood relations, Zelda, and it's always going to bring forth some kind of strong reaction. We react to our relatives. We connect with those who are related to us in a way that is unique. It's a Torah idea. It's a Torah idea. It may be nature, but it's also a Torah idea. And I think that having strong family units is something that is difficult and challenging and should be worked on. We should invest time.
Why do you think it's so difficult to get along with family? I mean, everybody uses the word family in a very sort of mild kind of way. Oh yeah, my family this, my family that. Why are we not more serious about family and the meaning that they have to our lives?
It's a good question. It probably has something to do with human nature. Probably has something to do with the natural jealousies that people sometimes feel about those who are closest for them. It's a very good question, Zelda. When we talk about the concept of divorce, it's actually seen as something that builds and helps marriage rather than destroy it. That is to say, when you can't take your spouse for granted, when you can't take your marriage for granted, then you have to work at it, and you have to do your best to try to ensure that it's going to be everything a marriage should be, bringing out the best from within each other, and it's worth making sacrifices and compromises in order to preserve. And when we take things for granted, invariably we don't make an effort, and we know it's always going to be there for us. Maybe it's because your spouse is not something you could take for granted, or someone you could take for granted, but your family is always going to be there, whether you engage or not. They are always going to be your family, and relationships and taking things for granted are not a natural fit. It doesn't go easily. So we have to work at those things. I mean, we see in the Torah that familiar relationships are challenging from the very beginning. Two brothers, the only two brothers in the world, and they couldn't get along, and one killed the other brother. First homicide is a brother, not a stranger, not a friend, not even an enemy, an actual brother, a twin brother. And when we talk about family relationships afterwards, Avraham Avinu has a very bad relationship with his father. Unfortunately, his father's an idolater, and they don't see things in the same way. And in the end, Avraham Avinu's father turns him into the authorities, and literally is almost the cause of his death, to the great pain and chagrin of Avraham Avinu's mother. And we see that Avraham Avinu has a nephew with whom he fosters and has a good relationship with, and then the relationship goes sour, and Avraham Avinu has to separate from his nephew Lot, and he has to send him away, and he makes it very clear that he will always be there for Lot, but at the same time, Avraham Avinu doesn't have the privilege to enjoy a good relationship with his nephew. And later he has a son named Yishmael who gives him a tremendous amount of grief. In the end, Avraham Avinu is reconciled with that son, but there's a number of decades where things are rocky and they don't go well. And we see that Yitzchak Avinu, Father Isaac, has two sons, twin sons. On some ways, they were identical. They were not. They were unusual kind of fraternal twins. They had the exact same voice and the same mannerisms, although their external appearance was different, and that means that they were fraternal twins, but prior to fertilization. And that's another very complicated thing, which we actually have evidence of in today's day and age. So we have these twins who are conceived at the same time, who are originally a single embryo that divided, and they can't get along, Zelda. And the next generation, Yaakov Avinu, Father Jacob, forget that he can't get along with his father-in-law, and it's an awful situation there. His father-in-law is a real monster, Laban, and a murderer and a thug. But Yaakov Avinu's own sons don't have an easy time getting along. So it's never, clearly from the Bible we can see, it's never easy to get along with family. But at the same time, the Torah emphasizes the importance of Shalom Bayit and getting along with family. So it's something we have to work at.
Why do you think that is? Why is it that we get along with friends because we choose our friends, but why is it that we don't get along with family?
Well, simple, Zelda. Think about that. Who do you choose as your friend? You choose people with whom you share lots in common with. You choose people who it's easy to like. People who you don't like, you don't want to be friends with them. So you aren't. You'll be polite, maybe respectful, and that's all. You just move on. But when it comes to family, invariably, they're going to be very independent human beings who have different opinions and different feelings, and they're not our friends necessarily. And we don't see things the same way. And if they wouldn't be our relatives, we probably wouldn't talk to them. But they're our relatives. They're our family. So now we have to get along. And that's not simple or easy in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's probably why familiar relations are so fraught. It's certainly clear from, two things are clear from Torah, Zelda. Number one, family relationships are fraught, not simple or easy, and difficult to maintain. Number two, it's worth maintaining those relationships, and we are supposed to make every possible effort to support and to reach out to family members in love, care, and consideration. And that's it's a difficult thing.
Well, for the life of me, can't understand why we can't get along with each other, whether it's a friend or whether it's a family member. I mean, I know that we have differences and we have difference of opinion, but does that mean that we don't have the opportunities to get along, to know each other, to understand each other? It just seems to me very, very unusual.
I actually don't know why that seems so unusual to you, Zelda. There are lots of people whom you don't like, and I'm going to say profoundly don't like those people. That doesn't mean that you should persecute those people. It doesn't mean that you should be disrespectful to those people. It means you choose not to engage with those people. That's not who you want to spend your Friday night dinner with. It's not who you want to socialize with. You don't like these people. That's okay. There's people I don't like. Every one of us has people we don't like. If you know, I've often said this, and I'll say it on air. People who are friends with everybody are actually friends with nobody, because that means you don't care. And if you care, you're gonna have people that have a very different approach to life, and you're gonna lock horns with them, and it's not going to be a comfortable fit. So it makes perfect sense that we don't get along with everybody. It makes perfect sense that we're not going to be good friends with everybody. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be respectful. We should be treat everybody with respect, and I don't have to be your friend to give you human dignity. But when it comes to family, Zelda, we're talking about people that we're supposed to be close with, whom we don't share that much in common other than DNA and our genes. And sometimes precisely because we're so similar, we have such a difficult time getting along with each other. It makes perfect sense that family relationships are fraught. It makes perfect sense that they're not like friendships. It makes perfect sense. But the difference between family and friends is that the relationship with a friend is based on external realities, things that you find in a kindred spirit. Either you think like this person, you feel like this person, you behave like this person, and it's therefore only that deep. It doesn't go beyond behavior, thinking, and feeling. However, our relationships with family cut to the essence of who we are. And even when we don't get along per se, and we don't think in like fashion, and we don't feel like fashion, and we don't behave in the same way, we still feel a love and a connection. That's much deeper. It's much more profound. And that's why we say blood is thicker than water. And I don't know why that's hard to understand. It's actually quite simple.
I mean, I don't understand why we don't get along. I don't understand why we do get along.
Zelda, let me interrupt you. I don't even know what that means.
Different people.
So you know that there's going to be people who are very different than you, and therefore you won't get along with them. For example, there could be somebody who does everything last minute, and you could be very organized. There could be somebody who likes disorder and chaos in life, and you like things to be very orderly. This is not a match made in heaven. You're not going to be good friends with this person. They like it hot, you like it cold. It's just the kind of person that you're going to respect and move on from. You're not only won't be friends with that person, you're in all likelihood not going to be able to work with that person. You won't even have what we call a good working relationship, and that's perfectly fine. Different folks, different strokes. People don't have to always be friends or have enough in common to work together. What they do require is a sense of respect and dignity for another. And something else that, Zelda, we talked about many times, but this kind of dovetails into it. We live in a society where everybody is obsessed with themselves, and they talk about their rights and their feelings incessantly. But really, what we should be talking about not our rights or our feelings. What we should be talking about is our responsibilities, the needs that we have, how we are supposed to treat another. The result is the same. If you emphasize the fact that you have to respect other people, or if you emphasize the respect that you deserve respect from everybody, the result will invariably be a society that's respecting others, and that's how it should be. But they're worlds apart. One is all about a selfish kind of journey, and one is a selfless journey. One is about a person who is obsessed with themselves.
Going to Sonny Goldstein. I'm not sure if he's available at this very moment. But Martin, if you're there, is Sonny available for our conversations?
Sonny is definitely available.
Okay, I hear the music getting piped in. So, Zelda, I'm just going to finish with this. We talked a lot about family this morning on air. And when it comes to the Jewish people, we may not look the same. We may not feel the same. We may not agree on much of anything. But the Torah says we are family. And therefore, we are obligated to love, nurture, and try to develop a continuous positive relationship with our fellow members of Yiddishkeit, with our fellow Yidden, and by increasing in Ahavat Yisrael, not only respect for all human beings, but specifically by increasing in a sense of love and connectivity towards the members of our true family, the ones with whom we share the same spiritual DNA, we accelerate the process of universal redemption, and we bring the arrival of Mashiach that much closer. May it be b'mheira u'b'yameinu speedily. and in our days. Amen. I wish you and all of our listeners a beautiful day. And since there might be people listening who might not listen again before Rosh Hashanah, let me take this opportunity to say Kativa v'chatima tova. May we all be inscribed and sealed for a wonderful new year that is filled with goodness and a happiness that's so good we can taste it.
Thank you, Rabbi Kaplan. Let's go to Sunny Gold today.
Shana Tova.
Okay? All right.
Thanks for joining. Have a beautiful